Hello, Molweni, Sanu, Hujambu. I'm Diesel Wilson, of course, standing in for my esteemed colleague, Tebegile Mkhototo. And this is Unwrap Africa, where we focus on the latest news, the latest trends, and the latest successes coming out of the African continent. Well, we start things off now by taking a look at that question of the day with a focus on Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, of course, been in power since 1986. What is your view on the 81-year-old seeking re-election in this month's national election? We welcome your thoughts and comments. Send us them on our social media platforms. We are at SABC News_TV, of course, on our X. We also have SABC Unwrap Africa on Facebook. The WhatsApp line on your screens, 0784591897. Looking forward to all those sentiments coming through. But for now, let's continue and let's get into that continental wrap. While supporters flooded Conakry streets after provisional results confirmed Mamadi Douambour's decisive election victory. His win marks Guinea's return to civilian rule following the 2021 coup. Ugandans are celebrating Zohran Mamdani's historic swearing-in as New York's youngest mayor and first Muslim leader. His journey from Kampala to American politics has inspired pride and renewed belief in youth potential. Meanwhile, Somalis gathered in Mogadishu to protest Israel's recognition of Somaliland's independence, calling it a threat to national sovereignty. Demonstrators warned that the move could deepen instability, whilst insisting Somalia's unity remains non-negotiable. Nigerian police say the driver of the vehicle involved in a crash that injured British former world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua and killed two of his close friends has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving. And African cities rang in the new year with fireworks and celebrations, from Cape Town's bustling harbour to Nairobi's city skyline. Crowds welcomed in 2026 with hope, with music and optimism for the year ahead. All right, so following that continental wrap, we're going to hone in on some election news. As we know, some 10 countries on the continent, they are scheduled to hold elections this year. It includes general, presidential and parliamentary elections, where, according to the Institute for Security Studies, many countries on the continent still struggle to have free and fair elections and seamless power changes. This is despite decades of democracy. So for more on the scheduled elections for the 2026 calendar, we're joined virtually by Professor David Moore from the University of Johannesburg. Prof. David, Happy New Year, and thank you for your time here on Unwrap Africa with us.
I'm actually retired from University of Johannesburg, so you can just call me David.
Okay, all right, David, thank you for your time. Let's weigh in on your expertise, given what is transpiring on the election calendar for 2026 on the African continent. Still, questions remain about governance, legitimacy, and just even, reform when it comes to elections at large. When we reflect back on some of the outcomes of elections that were held last year, is there anything worth celebrating in terms of Africa's elections record?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think we have to look at it after many years of the hopes for democracy, which basically started after the end of the Cold War. Everybody thought, okay, we can wave a magic wand over Africa and we'll get democracy overnight. Well, it doesn't go like that, and so people get very disappointed very quickly. But there's nothing magic about this process. I think we have to look at them in the context of how societies are changing over a long, long period of time. Since colonialism till now, we're basically in an interregnum, that word which is overused from Gramsci's analysis of when societies change. So I think if we look at the way in which new ruling classes are forming, how they accumulate their wealth, how they use politics and the state to accumulate wealth, and how the nation state is on the way to being a cohesive entity both in terms of people's identity and in terms of regional and international relations. And thirdly, I think we have to look at this process of democratization in a very, very wide frame, which includes elections. They're a good monitor, a good reflection of what's going on, but including things like generational, the emergence of a new generation coming in very quickly, and all sorts of other politics at other levels. So if we look at, for example, Uganda, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, and it's very interesting that Soren Mamdani is the son of one of Africa's best political scientists, Mahmoud Mamdani, and in a sense then is a product of Uganda's many struggles for democracy. And it looks like Museveni's going to try, as usual, to hang on until he's older than Mugabe was when Mugabe was forced out of power. So we kind of have to look at, the way in which the Ugandan state political apparatus is repressing the opposition. Since middle of last year, there's been 300 people arrested, and Bobby Wine is in big trouble. His supporters are in jail. So we'll be watching that very closely. And I think also when we think of the way in which politics develops, look out for Museveni's son, who's now the head of defense, and look at how that transition, that generational transition is coming into power. And of course, wrapped up with all sorts of human rights violations. We're seeing pictures of them there, including, gender relations, repression of lesbians and gays. All of that sort of stuff is wrapped up with this guy coming into power. It's also very interesting that way back in the 80s, when the resistance to Idi Amin was developing in Uganda, Museveni was a protege of President Nyerere in Tanzania. And think back a couple of months ago in Tanzania, what happened to those elections? Tanzania used to be seen as kind of the epitome of democratic socialism. So that's going to be a really, really important one to watch.
David, it's so much to condense in such a short time, but obviously we're just trying to make sense of what precedence has been set, the social contracts between citizens and its rulers as well, but even just the long-term impact that this goes beyond liberation movements and the ability to govern as well. Another country that comes to mind is another long-term ruler looking to extend his rules, President Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Congo Republic. I mean, considering that he removed the age limit for the president in 2015, do you think that the political situation in the Congo is conducive for free and fair elections, given the dynamics also unfolding on that front?
Short answer is no.
Sure.
But I think there we have to look at the relations between the ruling clique and oil. And that's, really, really important. The patronage system that has arisen over the decades in Congo-Brazzaville. Often if you Google Congo, you'll just get the DRC. Exactly. But when we think of oil and the resources, we think of what happened yesterday in Venezuela. And that was a lot to do with oil. And so that brings in another election, which is going to be pretty important, is the midterm elections and what happens to Trump in the United States. That's going to have a lot to do with Africa, though not as much as with Latin America, but with oil-rich countries, especially in Congo-Brazzaville. We have more European connections, French connections with Elf and Total Oil. So I think that elite is going to remain pretty cohesive and pretty authoritarian. But interestingly, on the side, is a united opposition movement, which has come up. Three parties forming a sort of alliance. They haven't got a leader yet, so that could indicate problems. One of the other opposition party guys from the Socialist Party has been detained for a long time. But so, these opposition parties emerge out of the past and take on new forms. So there's one party within this opposition group, which is called the Marxist-Leninist Party. So you kind of get those remnants of the past coming in there. So it's going to be interesting too. But I doubt if there will be much change.
Well, David, there's still Libya with its presidential and parliamentary elections, Cameroon with its parliamentary elections, South Sudan as well. So we're going to have to monitor all those developments, the shifting geopolitical landscape as well. Thank you for your time at this hour and for weighing in. David Moore there, just weighing in on some of the elections we can expect for the year of 2026, of course, on the African continent and some of the dynamics impacting as we continue there. Well, as we recap that question of the day, again, the big story there, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has been in power since 1986. We've been asking you to share your thoughts. What is your view on the 81-year-old seeking re-election in this month's national election? This is what you had to say. Let's take a look at those comments. Pule, you've weighed in. It sounds like he's got a power trip going on. No one should rule forever. The Ugandan voters get some blame too for keeping him in office. Maybe it's time for the African Union to step in and sort things out. Well, continuing with your thoughts, Sydney, you've also shared a sentiment there. It is an insult to the youth of Uganda. Tuki says he must give others a chance. Weighing in further there, Sadiria says another African dictator clinging to power. Teso, you've also weighed in. I do not want any excuses from my president, Bobi Wine. He has to win this presidential election by all means. We, the people of Uganda, have given him all the support he needs. We have done our part. The ball is in his hands to save us from 40 years of misrule. The time is now. Well, that conversation continues as we look at your thoughts coming through. Do keep the conversation going. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Unwrap Africa. You can see AFCON fever is rife here with us. Of course, the CAF Africa Cup of Nations has reached fever pitch with some surprise packages reaching the last 16 of the tournament. There have also been some very notable disappointments with big teams like Gabon being knocked out of the group stages. SABC News reporter Sifiso Ramara, he sat down with BBC sport journalist Addo Junior, ready to discuss the tournament's progression so far. Let's take a listen.
We are here in Morocco, in Rabat, for the Africa Cup of Nations 2025 tournament. We've now reached the business end of the tournament. Joining me, it's Addo, a sports journalist with the BBC, to tell us how he saw the tournament from the word go. Thank you very much, my brother. What do you make of the tournament so far, the standard of football that you've seen so far?
I think it's a massive privilege, first of all, to say to you to have a chat around the AFCON. And I think this particular Africa Cup of Nations has been special in its own way because we were basically looking at how the teams would turn up. And I think it's quite almost now like usual that in the first round of games, it takes the big guns a bit of time to come to the party, obviously because the players are released very, very late. And so far as this AFCON was concerned, players being released on the 15th of December and allowing them to start a competition on the 21st of December clearly showed that it was going to take a bit of time. But whether it was Morocco, whether it was South Africa, whether it was Cameroon, whether it was Senegal, or whether it was Algeria or DR Congo, all the big guns, I would say, were able to come up after the third game in the group stage. So I'd say that in terms of what we're expecting from the top guns, the host nation Morocco, you can talk about it. The first two games were not exactly what they expected, but that game against Zambia made everybody feel very relaxed. I saw how Ivory Coast came back against Gabon. That was like a real statement win, and that's what you want. I saw Ivory Coast up against Cameroon. That was the level game that you were expecting. I saw South Africa do their bits in their group. Even Egypt, who have not played with a lot of flair, have been able to show. And it's actually the reason why in the round of 16 this year, we have almost every big team in there. They've managed to qualify. And then when you come to, well, you call them the minnows, they've been able to show a bit. I like Mozambique for what they have shown across board in terms of what they've got there in the performances that they put out and the courage, the sheer courage is shown in playing the games. I like the fact that we also saw, and nobody expected this, I was going to say Sudan scoring and winning 2 games. This is the first time they've done that since 1970. So that's a very good thing as well to see Sudan go along. And so I think generally, it's been a competition that I would say for the first round of games has been really, really good. And it's one that tells us that most teams are yet to get to the second level. So we can expect so much in the round of 16.
Maybe let me make a follow-up.
Yeah.
The dominance of North and West Africa has been confirmed, even in this tournament, like before the rest of the tournaments that we've seen.
Yes, I tell you, I spent some time going through what these North African countries do, especially when they host it. And in the history of the Africa Cup of Nations, the North African countries have hosted it 11 times. And in those 11 times, they have won it 6 times. And in those 11 times, they have been to the finals 8 times. And in only those 3 occasions where they didn't make it to the finals, guess what? They all played the third place of games. So anytime the competition is hosted in North Africa, they are a real force to actually go against. And so whether it's Egypt, whether it's Algeria, whether it's Morocco, whether it's Tunisia, you have to watch out. The only side that has hosted this competition in North Africa and hasn't won it is Morocco. The first time they hosted was in 1988, and Cameroon won the competition here. They played the third place of game with Algeria. So they will be hoping that this is the one that they get to win, because Tunisia won in 2004. Egypt won it on 3 occasions. We saw that in 1986. They managed to win it. They also won it as well in 2006. So they know exactly what they're doing. So for the North African side, yes. But if there's been any region in Africa that has mustered the courage to come here and win it, it's West Africa. Cameroon won it here in '88. Nigeria won it here as well in 1994. So you pay attention to the North African sides who are playing very well, as you can see, because they are in comfortable environments, but also check out the West African countries, because they are also here to do a lot. But I think that in the midst of all these, I look at DR Congo and South Africa as cases where the teams have been improving gradually, and there will be 2 dangerous sides to come up against. And that most teams, because the Egypt game was just a one goal that made the difference, but most teams largely have won or not won based on how well they played in the competition.
That's all we heard from BBC sports journalist George Addo, based in the UK, but originally from Accra in Ghana.
Unwrap Africa continues. Welcome back. Let's take a look at that question of the day. We're looking at elections happening on the African continent as we kickstart off this 2026 year. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, he has been in power since 1986, and we're asking you your views on the 81-year-old seeking re-election in this month's national election. Once again, you have weighed in. Let's take a look at some of those comments coming through. Well, Tato, you said that's how African leaders destroy their countries. He is not the only one. Stephen also says there the US seems to be the biggest supporter of Museveni. China, Russia and the UK also gave support to Uganda's authoritarian regime. Strategic positioning makes Uganda a good location for extraction of wealth from surrounding countries. Museveni maintains the status quo. Citizen shared a thought there. When journalists are tear-gassed and a leading candidate is treated as an enemy, it exposes the reality of our politics. Elections should be contests of ideas, not wars enforced by violence. A country is not personal property and citizens are not subjects. Ugandans deserve a free, fair and peaceful democratic process. And Kevin Muruta also says Museveni has stabilized Uganda for a long time. It will be difficult for Bobi Wine to convince Ugandans. I hope that wraps up your thoughts. Thank you for interacting with us. Of course, we'll monitor all of those developments as the year continues and that calendar plays out on the election front. As we continue now with more news on the African continent, as we kick off the year, our producer, Nonhlanhla Mtembu, caught up with some people who shared their hopes and dreams for 2026.
What does 2026 hold for Africa? What are Africans expecting from the year 2026?
Africa must wake up. Africa must stand united, and Africa must channel a path for itself so that we can truly experience liberation and development and growth in our continent. And that must start immediately. When we set a developmental agenda for Africa from January 2026, then we can begin to execute those things and begin to pull resources together to make sure that Africa is got a seat on the table.
What's your message for Africans in the year 2026?
My only message to Africa, I would say to the African leaders, let's unite. Let's unite, let's be one. You know, when we unite, that we don't need a visa from Kenya to Cairo, from Cairo to Lagos. You know, when we unite and stand like one, like a country, it will be great.
Africans do not have a choice than to unite and to put our resources behind our developmental agenda. And this is what I hope and I pray we see in 2026.
I'm happy events like this bring Africa together. We celebrate, all of us from different countries, but we come together as one, rejoicing and celebrating.
Unwrap Africa 2026, we continue to hear the sound, the voices, and see the beauty of Africa.
All united as one, unity in diversity. That's where we leave Unwrap Africa for this edition. Of course, also wishing Bafana all the best of luck as they take on Cameroon in that last 16 at the AFCON happening tonight at 9 p.m. We are behind them all the way, united in our green and gold. Do so the nation with pride. Halala. We'll leave it there for now. Do enjoy.